Corporation, Stark Molecular Laboratory, North Luzon Express Terminal.
Shown is the fire that ripped through a poor community in Quezon City, Philippines.
The blaze killed 8 people, including 6 children, and destroyed 80 houses. More details on this later in the news. Good evening. I am CJ Hirro.
And I'm Nina Ricci, Alagao, Flores. This is Mata ng Agila International. And now for the headlines. Ukraine evacuates dozens of civilians from besieged Mariupol steel plant. Ferdinand Bongbong Marcos Jr. and Sara Duterte Carpio lead the latest Pulse Asia survey few days before May 9 polls. 6th survivor pulled from China building collapse, dozens still missing. Landslide at illegal Indonesian gold mine claims 12 lives. And Princess Charlotte turns 7. See her new photos released by Prince William and Duchess Kate. Earlier efforts at evacuations from the Azovstal steel plant in the Russian-held Mariupol had been futile. But at least 20 civilians, including several children, were able to leave the badly battered steel plant on Saturday in what could be the start of a long-awaited, larger evacuation of the last holdout. Ukrainian fighters of the Azov Regiment, which has been defending the site, said 20 civilians had left, possibly for the Ukrainian city of Zaporizhia, about 225 kilometers to the northwest. Russia's TASS news agency carried a similar report, though putting the number of evacuees at 25. Ukraine's President Zelensky said in a video Saturday evening that Kyiv was doing everything to ensure that the evacuation mission from Mariupol is carried out. Though a United Nations planned evacuation had been set, it was unclear whether Saturday's evacuation was UN-led and whether further evacuations were imminent. There were also no immediate details on the condition of the evacuees.
Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov declared Russia is not looking to end the war in Ukraine by Victory Day on May 9. Speaking with Italian outlet Mediaset, Lavrov insisted Moscow would not rush to wrap up its so-called special military operation in time for the anniversary. The foreign minister added that the pace of the operation in Ukraine depends, first of all, on the need to minimize any risk for the civilian population and Russian military personnel. Russia typically marks Victory Day in grand style with a large military parade in central Moscow and speech by President Vladimir Putin hailing the country's leading role in the defeat of fascism in Europe. But this year's celebrations will come against the backdrop of Moscow's conflict with Kyiv, which Putin justified by claiming the ex-Soviet country requires denazification and mentioning other allusions to World War II. Now, Lavrov said Russia will solemnly celebrate May 9 as the country always does. He also reminded the public to remember those who fell for the liberation of Russia and other republics of the former USSR from the Nazi plague. Russia's military turned its focus onto Ukraine's south and east. It claimed that over 1,000 of its soldiers have been killed in the operation.
U.S. Speaker of the House Nancy Pelosi made a surprise visit to the capital of Ukraine. While meeting with President Volodymyr Zelensky in Kyiv, Pelosi reiterated American support for Ukraine's fight for freedom. Pelosi's trip had not been previously announced for security reasons. She was accompanied by half a dozen U.S. lawmakers who also took part in the 3-hour meeting. Pelosi later told reporters she will not be intimidated by Russian President Vladimir Putin, who has threatened to retaliate against U.S. military aid to Ukraine.
Do not be bullied by bullies. If they're making threats, you cannot back down. That's my view of it, that we're there for the fight, and you cannot fold to a bully.
Kyiv said its drones sank 2 Russian patrol boats near the Black Sea's Snake Island, where Ukrainian soldiers had rebuffed Moscow's demands to surrender at the start of the conflict. In a statement distributed on social media, Ukraine's defense ministry released grainy black and white aerial footage showing an explosion on a small military vessel. Ukrainian Armed Forces Commander-in-Chief Valery Zelensky was quoted saying Bayraktars are working, referring to Turkish-made military drones. Raptor patrol boats can carry up to 3 crew and 20 personnel. They are usually equipped with machine guns and used in reconnaissance or landing operations. Snake Island became a symbol of Ukrainian resistance after a radio exchange went viral, in which Ukrainian soldiers rebuffed demands from the crew of a Russian warship to surrender. The Russian ship involved, the Moskva, sank in the Black Sea in mid-April following what Moscow said was an explosion on board. Ukraine said it had hit the warship with missiles.
Russian pilot Konstantin Yaroshenko is now seeking to hold Washington accountable, claiming that he endured prolonged torture, both physical and psychological, in the hands of U.S. authorities. The Russian pilot returned home after spending some 10 years in a U.S. prison over his alleged involvement in a drug smuggling scheme. He maintained his innocence, stating that he merely got caught in the middle of a big political game against Russia. Yaroshenko said in an exclusive interview of RT News that he was kidnapped by the U.S. authorities, their intelligence, the DEA, and Liberia's NSA on May 28, 2010, from a hotel and subsequently transferred to the NSA's headquarters. He admitted that at some point he did not even want to live, adding that the agents who tortured him were very good at their job. Yaroshenko said there was a torture room where he was tortured for 2.5 days. It was inhumane torture, physical and psychological, with enormous pressure. The Russian pilot also said that only the continuous support from his family in Russia helped him endure those hardships. He said only the faith in the Russian people, the Russian government, and the Russian president has helped him to endure in this very difficult situation. Yaroshenko was swapped on Wednesday for U.S. national Trevor Reed, who ended up in Russian custody back in 2019. Reed was detained in Moscow for drunk and disorderly behavior and an assault on police officers. Now, Yaroshenko plans to try and bring the U.S. and Liberian authorities to justice over the hardships he has endured and the systematic violation of basic human rights he witnessed.
1 week before the May 9 national and local elections, the top candidate for president, former Senator Ferdinand Bongbong Marcos Jr., maintains his lead in the latest Pulse Asia survey. Based on the poll conducted from April 16 to 21st, Marcos got a 56% preference rating compared to Vice President Leni Robredo, who's trailing behind with 23%. Her latest rating is 1% lower than that of the previous survey. Meanwhile, boxing champ and Senator Manny Pacquiao with 7% has grabbed the third slot from Manila Mayor Isko Moreno Domagoso with 4% and Senator Panfilo Lacson with 2%. Former presidential spokesman Ernie Abella and Faisal Mangondadato both got 1%, while Caliode de Guzman received 0.3%, and both former National Security Advisor Norberto Gonzales and Jose Montemayor Jr. got 0.1%. Now, for the vice presidentiables, Marcos' running mate, Davao City Mayor Sara Duterte Carpio, maintains her lead with 55% over Senate President Vicente Soto's 18%. Meanwhile, Senator Francis Pangilinan got 16%. Dr. Willie Ong has 3%. Manny Lopez has 1%. And Buhay Party List Representative Lito Atienza got 0.5%. Lastly, vice presidential aspirant Walden Bello has 0.4%, Carlos Serapio got 0.3%, and Rizalito David got 0.1%.
Davao City Mayor and Vice Presidential aspirant Inday Sara Duterte Carpio vows to move mountains if elected Vice President. In an exclusive interview with Net25's Saganang Mamamayan, Mayor Sara said she may not be the best and the brightest contender for Vice President, but she is committed and has the heart to do the job.
I would not say no that I will be the best Vice President that our country will ever have. No, we will let history be the judge of that. Pero yung nasa akin po talaga at lagi kong sinasabi na sa ating lahat, Sen, is yung tibay ng puso ko as a Filipino. Matibay talaga ang puso ko, Sen. I'm not the best, I'm not the brightest, I'm not the most brilliant candidate out there. Pero kung meron kang ipapagawa sa akin, I will move mountains para ma-deliver yan sa iyo.
For Mayor Sara, the hardest part of the campaign is being apart from her 3 kids. The grueling campaign requires her to hop from one province to another, especially when she launched her Mahalin Natin ang Pilipinas campaign, where she rode a motorcycle from Mindanao to Luzon. Nevertheless, there are sweet moments, and what she considers the sweetest part of the campaign is meeting people and having more friends.
Doon po sa unang buwan, sa February po, mahirap po talaga. Natutulog ako na pagod, pagising ko, pagod pa rin ako. But because Filipinos are resilient, no, so we always adapt to the prevailing circumstances. Nung March, etong April, okay na. Hinahanap na namin kung saan yung mga lugar, kung saan mga ngampanya.
As the campaign reaches its final stage, Mayor Sara says she remains committed and determined to work hard. The president's daughter promises to push for the benefits and the rights of the workers as the nation commemorated Labor Day on Sunday, May the 1st. She also welcomes the enactment of RA 11708, or the Metropolitan Davao Development Authority Act, that would benefit the region. Lastly, thanking Net25 for the opportunity given to her, Mayor Sara calls on Filipinos to get their COVID-19 booster shots, respect the election results, and love the Philippines.
Lahat tayo ay dapat respetuhin natin kung ano yung resulta ng eleksyon at suportahan natin yung mga ihalal ng mananalo at ihalal ng ating mga kababayan. Maraming salamat po sa patuloy ninyo na pagsuporta sa akin. Mabuhay ang Pilipinas. Mahalin natin ang Pilipinas.
For the May 9 national and local elections, the Department of Education, or DepEd, will deploy more than 647,000 public school teachers to help as members of the Board of Election Inspectors. Education Secretary Leonor Briones ensures the department's all-out support in the conduct of next week's elections to guarantee its success. Briones says DepEd's priorities are the health, safety, and compensation of the teachers who will once again sacrifice their time and energy amid the coronavirus pandemic. Of the said number of teachers, more than 319,000 will be members of the electoral boards, or EB. More than 200,000 will act as EB support staff, and more than 1,700 will be members of the Board of Canvassers. Another 38,989 will be assigned as DepEd supervisor officials, or DESO, while 87,162 others will be DESO support staff.
Still in the Philippines, a family of 8 people died, including 6 children, when a fire ripped through a community in Quezon City, Philippines, and destroyed 80 houses. Fire officials said another 3 were injured after a fire broke out around 5 in the morning on the second floor of a house in a crowded informal settlement inside the University of the Philippines, Diliman. It took nearly 2 hours for the firefighters to extinguish the blaze. Senior Fire Officer Greg Bichayda said the victims were trapped inside their homes as the fire spread quickly. Around 250 families were reportedly affected by the blaze. The initial cost of damage was about 150,000 pesos. Authorities are still probing the cause of the fire, which left nearby houses made of light materials totally damaged. Coming up, 6th survivor pulled from China building collapse, dozens still missing. Landslide at illegal gold mining in Indonesia claims 12 lives. And workers hold May Day rallies worldwide. Stay tuned for more news around the globe when Mata ng Agila International returns.
This port.
You're still watching Mata ng Agila International. Rescuers pulled the 6th survivor from the debris of a collapsed building in central China Sunday. Mayor Zheng Jianxin of Changsha said they will spare no effort to search for 17 others still trapped in the rubbles. In a frantic effort to find the remaining trapped people, the city dispatched 700 firefighters, armed police and officers, and social emergencies rescuers, as well as 120 units of firefighting vehicles, large excavators, power generation vehicles, and life detectors. The rescue team also utilized rescue dogs to carry out rescue operations on the spot. Mayor Zheng said initial investigations showed the collapsed house was self-built by the residents. It had 8 floors, with tenants making different structural changes to the rooms. The local authorities vowed to further investigate the incident to identify the exact cause of the collapse. For now, they have arrested 9 people, including the building's owner, and 5 who allegedly wrote a false safety report.
12 women are dead following a landslide at an illegal gold mine in Indonesia. The women were digging for gold when a cliff collapsed and buried them. 2 other women who survived at the site ran back to a nearby village to report the incident to authorities. The victims were aged 30 to 55 years old. It took several hours for rescuers to recover the women's bodies from a 2-meter deep hole filled with mud. Common across mineral-rich Indonesia, unlicensed mines attract locals who scrounge for leftover gold without using proper safety equipment. Mining accidents are frequent across the country due to landslides, especially during the monsoon season in the summer months.
With new cases of COVID-19 surging in Taiwan, the government there says it will not follow China's move and impose lockdowns. Premier Su Cheng-chang says Taiwan and its cities will not be locked down as cruelly as China has. That leaves neighboring China, including its financial hub, Hong Kong, as the only major economy still sticking to a zero-tolerance policy. Taiwan recorded more than 16,000 new cases on Sunday. And although infections are rising, the island's leaders have signaled they will follow other former zero COVID-19 economies such as Singapore, Australia, and New Zealand by opening up. Taiwan's health minister has warned that the country's daily case count could more than double to 37,000 in a week. About 80% of the population is double vaccinated, while nearly 60% have taken a 3rd shot.
Iraq was once again covered in a thick sheet of orange as it suffered from the latest in a series of dust storms. Dozens were hospitalized with respiratory problems in the center and the west of the country. A thick layer of orange dust settled across streets and vehicles, seeping into people's homes in the capital, Baghdad. Flights were grounded due to poor visibility at airports serving Baghdad and the Shiite city of Najaf. A health official said hospitals in Najaf received 63 people suffering from respiratory problems as a result of the storm. Another 30 were also reported admitted in the mostly desert province of Anbar in the west of the country. Iraq is particularly vulnerable to climate change, having already witnessed record low rainfall and high temperatures in recent years. Experts said or have said these factors threaten to bring social and economic disaster to the war-scarred country.
May 1st is a public holiday in many countries, and Sunday saw events on every continent, some of them violent. In Paris, France, youths broke from the main march and clashed with police. Vandals also smashed shop and office windows. The protesters say they wanted to send a message opposing the policies of President Emmanuel Macron, who recently won a 2nd term in the elections. In Turkey, riot police battled protesters. Scores of people were arrested as they marched in support of workers' rights. Scuffles were also reported in several Italian cities, while 10,000 people joined a demonstration in Madrid, Spain, as unions called for protests in other Spanish cities. In Santiago, Chile, demonstrators took to the streets to protest against the rising cost of living. Looting, riots, and gunshots left at least 4 people wounded as street vendors clashed with protesters. Meanwhile, in Argentina, one leftist organized group in Buenos Aires protested repaying International Monetary Fund loans. Another group of pro-Argentina government demonstrators praised the current policy. There were also 2 separate marches in the Venezuelan capital of Caracas. Hospital workers and other basic service employees at one demonstration demanded what they call a dignified salary. On the other hand, President Nicolas Maduro addressed the crowds at a separate pro-government march at another location in the city. He blames U.S. sanctions for his country's economic storm, but says Venezuela is headed toward prosperity.
The Spanish government said the mobile phones of the country's Prime Minister Pedro Sanchez and Defense Minister Margarita Robles were tapped using Pegasus spyware in an illicit and external intervention. The Ministry of the Presidency, Felix Bolaños, confirmed the news and said they want the Ministry of Justice to investigate. Bolaños said there have been 2 intrusions into the PM's mobile phone in May 2021 and an intrusion on the Defense Minister's mobile phone in June of 2021. The illegal tapping of these phones has been ascertained in the course of an ongoing verification and expected to reach all members of the government. The official said the government has already implemented and will continue to implement measures to reinforce security protocols in the communications of all official bodies. Bolaños added that the government will be inflexible with any violation of fundamental rights and freedoms and will reinforce any procedure that may be necessary to guarantee citizens' rights.
Brazilian businesswoman Luiza Trajano has made it onto a lot of lists. Time's most influential people, Forbes billionaires, the biggest fortunes in Brazil. But although she has been touted as a potential contender in Brazil's presidential elections this year, she said that she is determined to stay off the ballot list. The 73-year-old entrepreneur said that she wanted to unite Brazil and not divide her country further. Not that Trajano is shying from the spotlight as the race heats up between President Jair Bolsonaro and ex-President Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva. The billionaire is still in the politics scene, promoting women's equality, fighting racial discrimination, and pushing to speed up Brazil's vaccination campaign against COVID-19. The business sector and political middle class seeks Trajano as a potential third-way candidate, as there was also talk Lula could ask her to be his running mate. Trajano confirmed that she has invited plenty of times to run for the government, including for president, but she would like to remain non-partisan and stay away from the ballot list.
The president of Ecuador has declared a state of emergency in 3 provinces for the next 2 months due to violence connected to drug trafficking. Guillermo Lasso ordered 4,000 police officers and 5,000 military personnel to patrol the streets of Guayas, Manabi, and Esmeraldas in Ecuador. Lasso says drug-related violence is at its highest level ever in those provinces. Certain areas will be under a curfew between 11 p.m. to 5 a.m., including the town of Duran, located near the port of Guayaquil. About 440 crimes have occurred in Duran and Guayaquil, the country's commercial center and the provincial capital of Guayas. Since the start of the year, more than 1,200 people have been killed as a result of drug trafficking. Next up, Beijing shuts Universal Studios and bans restaurant dining in major escalation of COVID-19 restrictions. And bed linens recycled into school shirts in South Africa. Find out more on these stories when Mata ng Agila International returns.
Portion.
watching Mata ng Agila International. Facing a sixth wave of COVID-19 infections, the Canadian province of Ontario still has to mask up in certain high-risk settings. In Toronto, Yolanda Espiras reports.
As cases in Canada rise in the sixth wave of COVID, Ontario now has nearly 34,000 reported active cases. Because of this, Ontario's Chief Medical Officer of Health, Dr. Kieran Moore, is maintaining the mask requirements for high-risk indoor settings. The requirements, which were supposed to end on April 27, will now remain implemented until June 11. As COVID testing becomes limited, reported cases no longer remain as the only source of accurate numbers. Canada has turned to wastewater testing to provide additional insight on positivity rates in the country. This test shows that the newest form of the Omicron variant, BA2, continues to be the most dominant strain of the virus. The Chief Public Health Officer of Canada, Dr. Theresa Tam, expects that the virus will continue to evolve. Dr. Tam states that they are preparing for the chances of new variants, alongside possible genetically mixed variants as a result of co-infection. Ontario is therefore expanding access to COVID antiviral pills and eligibility for 4th doses of the vaccine. Currently, those aged 60 and over, alongside Indigenous communities and their non-Indigenous household members aged 18 and over, are eligible for a 4th dose. Ontario's and Canada's top doctors, Dr. Moore and Dr. Tam, continuously advise that the best method of protection against COVID is masking and vaccination. Yolanda Espiras, Eagle News, Toronto, Ontario.
Businesses in Sydney, Australia are getting back on their feet after enduring the impact of the pandemic. To help boost sales and get people supporting the local economy, public transport was available to use at no cost for 12 days. Abigail Karungay reports.
Siders enjoyed 12 days of free public transport this April across the entire of Greater Sydney. From April 14 to 26, all modes of public transport, from buses to trains to ferries, were completely free to use. The initiative was designed to encourage people to go out and support businesses in an effort to boost the economy as it recovered from the lockdown period. Ferries and trams operated at full capacity, with commuters enjoying not only the great weather, but more so the free ride. On one Tuesday, trips showed a 13% increase compared to the same day a month earlier. The weekend trips, however, brought a massive 54% jump. Ferries in particular sailed the weekend away with over 64,000 passengers. Abigail Karungay, Sydney, Australia.
Beijing shuts down Universal Studios, banned all restaurant dinings, and ordered residents to provide proof of a negative COVID-19 test to enter public venues in a major escalation of restrictions as a 5-day holiday begins. Though the city's eateries will halt dining in, food deliveries are allowed. After the holiday, workers and students will be required to present a negative COVID-19 test taken within the previous 48 hours to return to work or school. Starting from May 5, residents must also provide a negative COVID-19 test taken within the previous 7 days to enter all public venues, including taking public transport. All residents are required to take a COVID-19 test at least once a week, according to officials. Universal Beijing Resort said its Universal Studios theme park and City Walk shopping zone would be closed immediately after receiving guidance from disease control authorities. The resort did not say when the park would reopen. Beijing reported 59 local infections, the highest number of daily cases in its current outbreak. The city has reported more than 300 cases since April 20. Meanwhile, in Singapore, Shanghai officials said that community transmission in the city had been effectively controlled following more than a month of stringent lockdown that confined most of its 25 million residents to their homes. Now, the Chinese Transport Ministry expects 100 million journeys to be made over the holiday, a 62% drop from last year.
Skincare is something that should be taken seriously, regardless of one's age. Skin, if neglected, may be vulnerable to damage and diseases. One major thing we should protect it against the sun. To give us some tips on how to do so, let's hear from skincare enthusiast Bernadette Ranguini in Virginia Beach in the U.S.
What time of day should we avoid being exposed to the sun's strongest ultraviolet rays? From 10 a.m. to 3 p.m., the sun's ultraviolet rays are at its strongest. We are approaching that time of the year, longer day hours, warmer weather, meaning more sun exposure. Not protecting our skin from the sun's harmful UV rays could cause sun damage, so it's important that we do our part to protect our skin. Here are some recommendations on what we should do to protect our skin. First, use sunscreen. Even on a cloudy day, we should use sunscreen. If you wear makeup, use makeup that has SPF, since makeup alone does not protect our skin from sun damage. The Skincare Foundation recommends that for any extended outdoor activity, look for a water-resistant, broad-spectrum sunscreen with an SPF of 30 or higher. But regardless of the SPF, you should reapply it every 2 hours. Wear long sleeves or pants. There are many clothing brands designed to protect our skin from the harmful UV rays. Look for clothing labeled with UPF or ultraviolet protection factor. Wear a hat that provides our face with shade. And also consider wearing sunglasses. And lastly, when outside, look for shade. Do what you need to do to protect your skin from the sun's harmful UV rays. Taking these extra steps into consideration could help protect your skin, and years later, your skin will thank you. I am Bernadette Ranguini, Mata ng Agila International, Virginia Beach, Virginia.
Police in the Canadian capital of Ottawa were out in full force on the weekend as motorcycle-led anti-establishment activists staged a protest. The heavy police presence was there to prevent the rally from evolving into a full-blown occupation of the city's downtown, like what happened 2 months ago. Back in February, demonstrators camped out for 3 weeks, making life unbearable for residents in the area. This time, police have cordoned off a 3-block area around Parliament. Police say they were also monitoring social media for evidence of threatening or intimidating behaviors. So far, several people have been arrested. A couple of dozen of vehicles have also been towed. Not everyone welcomed the bikers. Counter-protesters turned out as well. For Dylan Green, it's a repeat visit to the capital. He spent 17 days protesting in the city 2 months ago.
So the first one was about the mandates, but now I think the snakes have exposed themselves, and this is a battle against the World Economic Forum. This is the trucks against the World Economic Forum, the blue collar versus the white collar. It's good versus evil, in my opinion.
Dozens of electric buses in Paris, France have been taken off the street after one burst into flames last week. The second time in a month a bus of that particular model has caught fire. The blaze caused thick clouds of black smoke and a strong smell of burning plastic. No one was hurt in the latest incident. Paris began building up its fleet of electric buses in 2016 in an effort to reduce pollution from vehicles. Now the city has 149 electric buses made by the manufacturer in question, almost a third of its electric fleet. Transit officials say until now there have been no major incidents with the bus units, but they will remain parked until it's determined what caused the 2 vehicles to catch fire.
In South Africa, where uniforms are mandatory in public schools, Danoline Johannessen launched Project Restore South Africa's to help families who can't afford the expense of buying school clothes. Project Restore SA's idea is simple. Recycle sheets from fancy hotels and, before they're even worn out, changed it into school shirts.
We found the project of Restore SA through a linen supplier that we use now for Parker Cottage, and we are giving them the old linen now to make school shirts.
A single bed sheet has enough material for 5 shirts in a vastly unequal country where school uniforms are compulsory. Johannessen believes that no child should leave home in rags.
We wanted to look at a way, how do we keep our children in school? How do we get them dressed for school? And how do we just, boost their self-esteem?
The shirts are a big help to families who live in a township 200 kilometers west of Cape Town.
Today I came here to collect a shirt for my daughter, and I'm very blessed.
Johannessen is happy to report that Project Restore South Africa have clothed more than 100,000 children since 2015.
Qantas announced today it will launch the world's longest nonstop commercial flight, with passengers set to spend 19 hours in the air, traveling from Sydney to London by the end of 2025. After 5 years of planning, the airline said it was ordering 12 Airbus A350-1000 aircraft to operate the Project Sunrise flights to cities including London and New York. Non-stop flights will start from Sydney by the end of 2025, it said, with long-haul trips later planned to include Melbourne. Qantas operated research flights for the long-haul routes in 2019, including a trial London to Sydney trek of 17,800 kilometers, which took 19 hours and 19 minutes. A trial New York to Sydney flight in the same year covered 16,200 kilometers and took a little over 19 hours. Singapore Airlines currently operates the world's longest nonstop commercial flight from Singapore to New York, covering 16,700 kilometers in a little under 19 hours. Qantas already operates a 14,498 kilometer Perth to London trip that takes 17 hours.
Thousands of years ago, a star exploded, making supernova 1987A the brightest supernova visible from Earth in almost 4 centuries. The exploding star was discovered 35 years ago, and since then, its spectacular remains offered answers to many topics, such as the stars that become supernovas and the processes that drive its explosion. Pictures taken before the blast revealed that the supernova 1987A had been a blue supergiant. Before its discovery, astronomers thought such stars would have to expand and cool to become red supergiants before they could explode. NASA Hubble said on its Instagram post that once NASA's Webb telescope starts science operations, it will observe the iconic remnants of supernova 1987A to find out more about the composition of it, temperature, and density. When we return, Twitter sees mass deactivations after Elon Musk's takeover. Princess Charlotte turns 7. See her latest photos released by the royals. And the family event Summer Blast 2022 ends with a bang. Find out more when Mata ng Agila International returns. You are still watching Mata ng Agila International. And now in sports news. Former number one Andy Murray is not supportive of the Wimbledon's plan to ban Russian and Belarusian players from its prestigious tournament, but added there was no right answer to the difficult situation. Wimbledon officials reiterated their decision, saying that a directive from the government regarding the invasion of Ukraine had left them with no viable alternative but to refuse entries from players from the two countries. Murray told reporters in Spain that his understanding of the guidance was that Russians and Belarusians can play if they sign a declaration that they're against the war and against the Russian regime. He pointed out that the Wimbledon ban was not helpful and could potentially put the families of players at risk. The former world number one does not want to pick sides, but he said that he understands where the players and the Wimbledon organizers were coming from. Meanwhile, the 21-time Grand Slam champion Rafael Nadal also called the ban very unfair on his Russian tennis mates. The Spaniard also told reporters that what's happening with the war is not his colleagues' fault. Wimbledon tournament kicks off on June 27. Princess Charlotte turned 7 today, May 2, and on social media, her proud parents, the Duke and Duchess of Cambridge, marked the occasion with new photos taken by the Duchess herself. The adorable photos show Princess Charlotte happy, looking fresh-faced and enjoying the garden. The princess was also seen posing and hugging her dog, Orla. With an adorable missing tooth, the photo caption simply read, "7 tomorrow." Citing a release from Kensington Palace, Harper's Bazaar reports the photos were taken just last weekend in Norfolk. Princess Charlotte's birthday comes days after an already celebratory day, the wedding anniversary of Prince William and Kate. Thousands of people crowded the Philippine Arena complex last April 29 and 30 to be part of the adventure and excitement of this year's Summer Blast. Not only was there a long queue of people wanting to visit the garden and the butterfly garden, but a lot of kids were also delighted to play at the arena wave pool. Apart from the various rides, food stalls, and fun activities, Day 2's Summer Blast concert at the Philippine Sports Stadium was a certified big hit. The audience were waving their cell phone flashlights as they sang their hearts out with their favorite OPM artists. Magnus Haven opened the performances, followed by P-pop groups Beanie and Dion. Imago's former vocalist Aya De Leon then thrilled the audience with the rock group's hit songs Taralets, Sundo, and Akap. The excellent performances also included those of Mateos, Glock 9, P-pop boy group First One, and Jumanji. Gladys Reyes' son Christoph Somero, December Avenue, and the P-pop girl group Callista also serenaded the crowd. The final and closing performance came from the Itchy Worms, who rendered 4 of their hit songs. Net 25 talents from Kada Umaga, Quezon City, and Shopping All the Way with Jojo A also greeted the crowd at the concert grounds. The program was hosted by comedian Empoy, actress Bea Binene, and Net 25 Kada Umaga host Maureen Shrivers. The artists expressed their gratitude to the organizers for giving them the opportunity to perform at the Summer Blast 2022. Mata ng Agila International will return. Don't go away.
Facebook is the most used social media platform in the Philippines. One could expect it to go further due to the digital transformation triggered by the pandemic. Yet all over the world, the social networking giant is losing not just a great deal of confidence, but also profit. On February 3, Facebook's parent firm Meta plunged over $200 billion in stock value. This was comparable to the size of New Zealand's economy. On that day alone, founder Mark Zuckerberg had some $30 billion in value wiped from his personal holding. The reason? A loss of 1 million daily Facebook users globally and weaker than expected profits. The sharp fall in Facebook and Meta in general was attributed to various factors, one of which is the onslaught of legal cases and punishments over its use of web tracking technology, which breaches EU privacy legislation. There was also its lax security policy on user data. It was reported on March 31st that Meta gave imposters user details like physical addresses or phone numbers in response to fake emergency data requests. Another issue is Facebook's potential for harm, including the uncontrolled spread of hate speech and its negative impact on mental health. For one, Zuckerberg's Meta platforms themselves allowed hateful remarks and calls for violence against the Russian military amid the Russia-Ukraine conflict. According to insider intelligence analyst Jasmine Enberg, combined with the rise of TikTok, brand safety concerns, and a shift in social media user behavior, there's a perfect storm heading straight for Meta's ad revenues. Last year, Meta, whose income is overwhelmingly dependent on large-scale targeted advertising, lost around 500 advertisers on FB. And although Meta has made it the metaverse its focus, its metaverse business, Reality Labs, continues to struggle, losing $2.96 billion in the first quarter. It's no wonder then how Zuckerberg, from being the third richest man, slipped into the 12th spot, losing 50% of his wealth in just 9 months.
Twitter saw mass organic deactivations and huge fluctuations in follower numbers for some of its highest profile users in the days after Elon Musk agreed to a $44 billion takeover of the social media giant. According to a published report, the follower numbers for some of Twitter's most followed accounts, which include former President Barack Obama and singers Taylor Swift and Katy Perry, all dropped by hundreds of thousands. Being Twitter's most followed user with 131.7 million followers, Obama saw his follower count fall by 300,000. Perry, who has 108.8 million followers, lost 200,000. Twitter routinely cleanses the platform of bots and fake accounts, which can lead to follower counts dropping. But the company confirmed that the recent drops were organic and not automated, meaning hundreds of thousands of user accounts are voluntarily deactivating. On the other hand, the follower numbers for prominent right-wing politicians and personalities have seen huge jumps in the days since the Musk takeover news. Brazilian leader Jair Bolsonaro gained 90,000 followers, while GOP Representative Marjorie Taylor Greene saw her follower count increase by 100,000. Now, Twitter deactivations come as users worry that Musk's approach to free speech will lead to changes in content moderation, less stringent policies on abuse, extreme political groups, and the return of banned users. Now, here are some notable events that happened today in history. In 2015, the much-awaited boxing match between Floyd Mayweather Jr. and Manny Pacquiao took place at the MGM Grand Garden Arena in Nevada. The fight was billed as the battle for greatness. Mayweather Jr. won the bout by a unanimous decision. In 1972, Dwayne Douglas Johnson, also known by his ring name The Rock, was born. Johnson is an American actor, businessman, and former professional wrestler. Widely regarded as one of the greatest professional wrestlers of all time, he wrestled for WWE for 8 years prior to pursuing an acting career. And in 2011, Osama bin Laden was killed by U.S. forces in Abbottabad, Pakistan. He was the founder of the militant Islamist organization Al-Qaeda and mastermind of numerous terrorist attacks, notably the 9/11 attacks in the U.S.
Before we conclude tonight's broadcast, let us ponder on a quote from Spanish philosopher Baltasar Gracian. When you counsel someone, you should appear to be reminding him of something he had forgotten, not of the light he was unable to see.
Well, just very quickly, the bottom line is that if you make others feel less educated and inferior, you just do not build understanding and consensus. And that's a wrap for tonight's news. Catch the latest updates on our social media channels. I am CJ Hirro.
And I am Nina Ricci, Alagao, Flores. This is Mata ng Agila International. Trusted, connected, on point.
Ang susunod na programa ay rated PG. Ito ay nangangailangan